All right. Well, it looks like it is just about 8 o'clock Mountain Time. So let's get started, everyone. All right. Well, welcome, guys. This is DES 344, Advanced Print Production. And we are in our first session of our second week of our 10th mod together. And thanks, guys, for being flexible. I know we probably have mostly video watchers, but hopefully you two are enjoying some coffee since we do have a slightly earlier session time than we have been having for the past week. So I guess the past two sessions. I feel like it's been longer than just two sessions, but that could just be me. But yeah, so welcome everyone. Hopefully you are having a good week, whatever week, time, day it might be. Oh, welcome. Looks like we've got a student. Exciting. But yeah, so hopefully things are going good. Kind of a couple housekeeping things. I did finish grading yesterday, late morning-ish. So be sure that you check out the grade book and see what's there, see where you are. There were a couple of you who haven't turned in anything yet. So if that is you, totally understandable. Like, I get it. Life happens, and October seems to be the month that's going at like double time. But just make sure that you do start turning in work, start turning in late work if possible, mostly because this course goes very quickly, as no doubt you have experienced in all of the courses that have brought you up to this point. So I just want it to not get suddenly overwhelming where you say, oh my gosh, I'm so far underwater, I can't see the surface. So, just little stuff like, I'm trying to think what was the little stuff from last week. Discussion, you can still enter in late to discussion. I'm cool with that. Or if you want to, do the assessment, that was not as difficult. The assignment had, some definite moving parts to it. So, I mean, if you don't have mental bandwidth, maybe that's not a thing that you try to do. But, just little pieces, and it's kind of these little pieces that build up is really how you are successful in this course. So, yeah, so we're not at the danger zone yet. This is not, time to panic or anything. Never time to panic. But it is a little like, okay, let's, get on track. And if you've been doing stuff, very good, very, very good, actually. But just for, the other stuff, just kind of make sure you start turning stuff in, and your grade will thank you come about 3 weeks, 3 weeks from today when it's a whole new mod. All right, so I think that's it for updates and such. Let me think. Yeah, I think that's all. So good to see everybody as usual. And I will turn off the webcam so we can jump back into the slides. Okay, so here is, oops. Here's an alert that we don't need to pay attention to. Here's the agenda for today. You can see that we are going to begin with feedback time. So you guys turned in some really cool stuff for assignment 2. So I want to make sure that we are checking it out, and then also that we are giving some feedback, because I know for many of you in the rubric, I did say, hey, really great start, but a couple things you might want to consider, a couple ways you might want to really update this so that it becomes something that is kind of quote-unquote portfolio quality, kind of professional. And so I want to make sure that we talk about that, and I can kind of provide you with a visual of that in addition to, the words that I had written. Kind of one thing about that, as long as we're on the topic, this is a 300 level course, so it's very much in your best interest, if as much as possible, you can be creating stuff that isn't, perfect portfolio quality the first time, but, with a couple tweaks, with a couple revisions, it becomes something that looks like something that someone in theory could hire you for. So it has that kind of polish. It has that kind of closure. Well, just I guess that professionalism to it. And the reason that it's kind of important that you are really thinking in this sphere is that for most of you, I think for all of you, you are not going to be in the program all that much longer. And so you really want to build your portfolio as intentionally as possible. So when I teach, 100 levels, when I teach even some 200 levels, it's kind of, there's a feeling of like, it's okay, you're still learning, expectations kind of just focus more on learning and being comfortable than on, actually thinking ahead to the future, because, you don't want to stress yourself out. You guys also don't want to stress yourselves out, but just know that, you will be making your portfolio. Well, hopefully you already are making it, but you will actually be showing it off. You will essentially be competing with, designers everywhere. So you really want to do your best when you're in school to really kind of focus and create and revise. I think, nobody creates perfectly the first time. Design is all about revising and revisions and such. But yeah, so I would encourage you to take comments, take feedback seriously, and make the time to just update things. And it will just make your lives so much easier when you get up to the portfolio course, because you'll already have stuff that's finished, that's finalized. So you won't have to go back and, just do so many updates. So it's kind of cool to be in a 300 level course, to know that, the end is in sight. It's also, if you're kind of like, whoa, this is kind of crazy and overwhelming. Yeah, I think so. Because the end is in sight. And the next significant thing you guys are going to be doing is not, how can I get an A? How can I complete whatever? It's, how can someone pay me for what I'm doing? And you have to have a serious mindset for that. And make sure that you're doing everything in your power now to make work that looks worthy of, people hiring you and paying you and that sort of thing. So that was a very long, a very long shift for feedback, but all good, important stuff. Okay, so we're going to do feedback. Then we're going to do a little bit of a printing methods review, just to kind of keep that fresh. Then we're going to talk about image resolution, and then we're going to talk about color pathways in print, and we'll see about these last two if they make it or if they appear in tomorrow's session, which either way should be fine. All right, so let's jump into learning objectives. Let's not jump in quite yet. Let's jump into feedback. One thing I did want to say too is hopefully you all are, or you all have, sorry, let me change to read mode, ordered some print samples, and probably they have not arrived yet at your residences, but hopefully that has not hindered you from ordering, and hopefully they will arrive sometime soon. So if you're like, print samples, what? Remember in week 1, our first session, we kind of talked about the elephant in the room in regards to print production, and the elephant, in regards to learning advanced print production in an online setting. And the elephant in the room really is print production is 100% physical. It is a physical process. It's, it's machines, it's presses, it's manpower, it's ink, it's paper, it's all these kind of things that are actual things. Online learning is all digital, it's all screen-based, it's like 0% tangible. So to learn advanced print production is a little tricky unless you have actual stuff that you can kind of look at and examine. And so one great way to look at and examine stuff is to order free print samples from different print companies. So in week 1, we went over just a whole bunch of places that you could check out. And I believe we have an announcement that also was created for it. check that out. Uh, Oops, I guess we didn't. Oh, session 1 slides. There you have it. So you can find a list of different things there. So yeah, so it's really cool. They're free. It's free. Who doesn't like free? Who doesn't also like mail? Two good things, free and mail, and very well designed, added to the mix on that. So definitely make sure you go in and do some ordering. So it's not a requirement for the course, but it will just make it's just a lot more fun to have that kind of stuff. And it'll just make what we're learning about that much easier, because you can see in your hands, you know, what's actually going on. It doesn't have to be quite so like just talking. It can actually be, you know, you can understand it in a more holistic way. Okay, so I think that's yeah, I think that's it. So let's jump into just a little bit of feedback. So kind of reminder, this was creating an information graphic to compare 4 different binding methods, which were perfect binding, saddle stitch, comb binding, and spiral binding. So you were to compare the, well, you were to write a little blurb about the binding method itself, the aesthetics, the page count, the pricing, and kind of create a comparison. So here's our first example, and I'm going to leave just a couple seconds, you know, so you all who are here or you all who are watching via video can kind of just, you know, think, what do you think of this piece? As a reminder, it's not the couple seconds of silence. When we give feedback, we always want to kind of assess overall what's going on. And then when we give feedback, we want to say, you know, it's constructive. So we want to say, this is working because, or I like this because, or I don't think this is working as well because. So always have a statement and then kind of a way to qualify the statement. It's never just a blind, I hate it, I love it, that's it. Always kind of try to unpack those statements too. So even as you're looking at this, you know, via video, just what's your gut reaction and why? And, you know, if you're like, fast forward, I just want to see what she's going to say about my stuff. In some ways, I get it. But in other ways, one of the ways you really grow as a designer is that you look at what other people have done and you think critically about it. So if you're just, you know, always just thinking about your stuff, you know, that's fine in some ways, but kind of looking at what other people are doing and challenging yourself about what is or isn't working, and also comparing your work to their work. Again, hello, professional world. You will be compared a lot. So now is, you know, when you can start jumping into that. But yeah, so just a couple seconds when you have some silence. What do you guys think of this? Okay, so for me, I will confess, as I've been sitting here chatting away and looking at this graphic, there's kind of been several things that have suddenly jumped out at me. And so if this was your piece, this is a little bit of feedback I didn't give you in the rubric, mostly because you know, it didn't occur to me till I've just kind of sat and stared at it in kind of a subconscious way. But what's kind of bothering me about this piece quite a bit, and I don't know if you guys are feeling this too, is that there's no title for it. I don't really know what it is that we're looking at. It feels like in some sense we just kind of jumped in midstream and it doesn't have any sort of context to it. And so this is something we didn't talk about in the session, which perhaps we should have. But it's very important whenever you create an infographic that you do have a title on it. So whether it's, you know, at the top, or I kind of feel like this one could be running up the side, just saying, wait, let's clear that because that red is a little too much. It's a little too much for me at this time of day. But yeah, so just, kind of running vertical or something, saying a comparison of print binding methods, just something that's a bigger, a bigger title that's kind of telling me why I should care and what it is that I'm looking at. So this is, I get this because I know the assignment, I have the background, but imagine if you were a professional who was looking to hire someone and they were just browsing your portfolio. I don't know that they would really know what this is. So it's very important to to just have that title there and then kind of go from there. The other thing too that's kind of standing out to me that I think you need to address is just the overall spacing. So right here, it's super tight to the top, but you have a whole bunch of space down here. So what it feels like is you just need to take everything and shift it down. So you have a nice margin down here. So how can you make this margin be similar to a margin up here? So it'll just feel overall a bit more kind of even in its span. So that's something that stood out to me. And if we do have one student, so if you have any comments, you can feel free to type them in the chat box as well. But yeah, so I mean, overall, the design it's nice. It's easy to read. It feels a little odd that we have photos happening and then we have illustrations. So generally, when you are making an infographic, because it's meant to be very, very graphic, very visual, you really want to keep all of your illustrations the same quality. So if you start with photos, you keep it at photos. If you start with illustrations, you keep it at illustrations. So it feels like one cohesive set. I always find when I'm building something like this, I tend to go with whatever I have the most of. So if I have illustrations that feel fairly matched and I have more of them, then that's kind of what I go with. If I have more photos, then that's what I go with. Here you're kind of 2 and 2, so I'm not sure what you have, but I think you kind of could get that sense of consistency. One other thing, and I'm actually going to clear, and I think I have this one pulled up as a yes, I do. Sweet. This is the benefit of you guys turning in your natives is a couple things feel a little off about this just in sizing, and you want to make sure that especially your text, if you're doing titles, that you're not squishing your text in any way. So this aesthetics and this aesthetics, they look different, and this one even actually looks a bit, oops. Ooh, that's an odd thing. I wonder how that's connected. It's a group. This one looks a little like it almost looks like it's a different weight of font, but I think it's just because it's been distorted. So you really want to just make sure that when you are putting your pieces in, especially if you're having repeated text, that you're doing it in a way that it's not getting distorted. And sorry, I just need to get my tools out so I actually have something to go with. Was that it? Window toolbar. Where are my tools? Yeah, there they are. Okay, so just want to give that slightly more breathing room so that it feels kind of cohesive overall. And then the other thing too, just make sure these are the same size. So, your images, this one looks a little tiny compared to this photo. So, whatever choice you're making as far as how you're showing it, you want to make sure that it's, kind of the same all the way through. Same thing here with your alignment. So here, these seem to line up. So this guy lines up. This one should, in theory, line up in the exact same spot. So move this over, so create a clear grid with your elements and then stick with that all the way. So it will make your life much easier because you won't have to try to eyeball. And it will also make your graphic better because it will have a consistency to it. So this one's really like, whoa, what happened here? So, you want to move this over. You want to make sure that these guys are fully lined up, which they look pretty good. Maybe that guy just needs to move over just slightly. So again, just these little fixes, these little touches. And this is not, like a complete overhaul, redesign, whatever. This is just an example of kind of ways that you can take your work and, just make it more professional looking, more portfolio quality, more just like the person that's created this kind of put thought and effort into this. And I know you put thought and effort into it, but you just need to be very purposeful in how you show it. And these details are really going to be kind of what the what sells. Let me just move this down so we can see it together. What sells you, or what sells people who are going to hire you, onto the fact that they should hire you, because you have this really good, attention to detail and such. So really kind of think about that. One other thing, as long as I'm in here and as long as we're chatting, text boxes, you really want to make them just about the same width. This one looks, it's a little narrow. So you want to, as you're spacing it out, figure out what the magic, what the magic sizing is so that everything can be the same. So infographics, so key. You want to keep everything the same, kind of regimented. This is not the time to say, hey, I want to make everything different. No, I mean, there's a place for that, but it's not in here. You have to think a little bit more kind of scientifically. But yeah, so that's that. So hopefully that makes sense, and hopefully it was kind of helpful to also see that in a live action way. So this is a good start, but you just have to really take it to the next level. Oh, the other thing we could do is just bump this out. So then, you do have some sort of title bar running this way, whatever that might be, or a title at the top. That also is a good thing. And spiral binding. Remember, we want to be consistent. We have binding everywhere. So consistency is key. Okay, so let's move on to the second one. So once again, I'll give you guys just a couple seconds to kind of look at this, digest. And I can tell that I did not emphasize titles because here again, there's not a title. And that's yeah, I should have mentioned it, and I slipped my mind until I'm looking at these. But yeah, so just a couple seconds. What are you guys thinking? What are you guys seeing in this piece? Okay, so overall, I really like if we kind of break down the graphic, a bit like what we did with the other graphic. This has a very strong sense of consistency overall. So this was built on a grid. I can tell. I can see how it's kind of flowing. I can see how things are lining up, and I really like that the graphics are so cohesive as well. So they have the same color palette. They have the same look. They look like they've been created by the same hand. So I think that's working very well. I think we need a title, but otherwise I think it's working in a good way. One thing I did want to say, and I think this was feedback that I did give you as well in the rubric, is it's a little how you've boxed each of these sections together is nice in that it feels separate. It feels like good chunks of information, and it feels very organized and tidy. But it feels a little overly separated when you want your eye to flow. So for example, you want your eye to flow saddle stitching this way, just in the natural way that we as humans encounter things. We tend to read down as opposed to reading. I mean, we read left to right, but when it's something that's like a more of a column distinction, we tend to read down instead. So I think for this, in order to aid the flow of information across, I would actually is this a box? Yeah, I would get rid of this box, and instead I would make almost like a stripe of color, and you could even do I'm thinking we're going to go extremely low opacity with this, so you could even do 10%, 20%, send that to the back. But yeah, so just different striping as opposed to using the boxes. And I would do basically every other binding method or so. But yeah, so just so you create kind of that stripe feeling, and then the color itself will be the indicator, like, hey, stay on this path, stay in this lane, eyes, and it will tend to carry it across a little bit better than having each thing in its own box. So I think that would just help overall. And the other thing you might want to try too is just updating this your headings. So it looks like they're regular, your type is regular, and it's nice that they're bigger, but I think you could even go full, kind of a fuller size, and maybe make it that, I guess you can't really see if it's that color. But yeah, just make it slightly larger, and just kind of slightly, well, not slightly larger, but make it a heavier weight so that it has more contrast overall, and it's just a little bit easier. It's just a little bit easier to scan. So these headlines are really what's going to kind of navigate you through the piece. So it's important if you can have them jump out in a certain way so they feel that much more cohesive. And I think moving them also over to the sides, so it's flush left with the type, will just make it stand out a little bit more as well. When it's centered, it's getting a little bit lost. So ideally, you want your eye to just kind of bounce through the piece, and it does to a certain extent with your graphics, but just then reinforce that with your heading, with your headers that you're putting on as well. And then this one, I actually see that the title, you could do something, up here, print binding methods, and this is even where you could binding a comparison of 4 print binding methods. You could make this then this blue color, and I think you could get away with it because it would be pretty big. You could even put it against a darker background so it would have a little bit more oomph to it. Oh, actually, you could put it up here and then make it white, and that might be good. Oh, look at that. Okay, yeah, so I mean, just a little indicator as to what exactly you're looking at, and kind of why it's important, why your audience member should engage with it, and just kind of what it's showing. So it gives it just a little bit more refinement, and it actually looks like a thing. It looks like a document that you could share with a client. You could use to kind of navigate them through their options. They can see instantly, what it's going to look like, pluses and minuses, that sort of thing. So I think overall it's good. I think just a couple tweaks with just overall navigation, and of course a title, and it could be, that's all it needs to kind of bump it up to something that could go into your portfolio very well. Okay, so let's get out of here and move along. And so this is, good for anybody who has the scheme of putting things side by side. Just think about how your eye can flow overall. Okay, so here's another one. Oops, let me zoom in a bit and give you guys a couple seconds. Check out and think about this. Okay, so this one does have a title, which is fabulous, since we kind of know what we're looking at. One thing that isn't so fabulous and is something that always pay attention to, spelling methods. Not quite sure about that. So you want to make sure that you don't, you aren't accidentally putting stuff in ways that is like, oops, I should have seen that. And I didn't. And it happens. It's design, especially when we get very close to our work. But it's always kind of that unfortunate, cringeworthy stuff of spelling errors showing up. Okay, so first thing, kind of keep that. Looks like the chat box says, I don't really like the black background. Yeah, sounds good. Why? What about the black background do you feel like is not to your liking? What's it doing? I will say, as that's responding, I like the idea that things are each in their own bands. I feel like this is a nice kind of span and separation of content. It helps to really separate out what's being shown in each section. You want to be a little bit careful because it looks like there's a margin on this side that's white, and then there's nothing on this side. So either you have it and you put it everywhere, or you don't have it and you don't put it anywhere. So it's kind of, there's not one, should it happen, should it be shown, or should it not? It's more like, what do you want to do? And then how can you be consistent in what you're doing? So what's the overall feeling? So another thing you want to kind of keep in mind is it's nice to have the title, but you really want to also title these different sections. So you have it to a certain extent here in your book, or I'm sorry, in your illustration, but it's not very big, and it's also not very consistent. So it looks like these are graphics that you pulled off the internet. And so you see one saddle stitch perfect bound, so this is kind of the same thing. And then we go to plastic comb bind, and then this one has nothing. And so you really want to pull out, these titles and put them, in a spot where they're easier to read. So maybe they go up here, maybe you run them vertically. What's the way that you can kind of show what's being, you can tell, I guess, what's being shown and kind of what goes with it. Okay, so, but yeah, it's an interesting kind of separation, and I like the graphics. I think wherever they came from, it's a nice feel. This one's a little bit distorted, so you can tell if we move that out of the way, which I guess we can't, you can tell in the perfect bound, it's just a little like squished. So you want to make sure that you're, if you're resizing, that you're holding down shift and, kind of keeping it that way. One other thing too, I'm noticing, I did notice, is this looks like it's bold. This looks like it's regular. So you really want to keep consistency. So that's, the key word for infographics. Nothing can deviate. This isn't the time to experiment. This is the time to start a system and stick with the system so that it just feels kind of overall organized. Okay, so we still have the comment about the background isn't working quite as well. So I'm curious, what about the background? Do you feel like it's just too dark? Do you feel like it's making the type hard to read? What's the feel of what the not so, or the dislike, I guess, of the black background? Okay, that was actually a well-timed mute because I just sneezed, so and nobody had to hear it. Okay, it's too dark. Yeah, I think that the tricky thing about especially a black background and white type is just that it has such a high contrast to it that it really becomes hard to read for the type that's on it. So I think what's happening here, and I think what we're kind of responding to, is just this idea that there's so much contrast, and so it kind of almost hurts your eyes with how the I don't think I have this one as a, no, I don't have it as an AI. Okay, sorry, just had to check quickly with how the type is laying out. So I think a better choice would be to have either a white background with dark text, or kind of like what we did in that previous assignment or previous example, where we take the opacity down pretty low and then we put black text on that. So just generally for comfort levels, it's better to have a lighter background and darker type. And it's all because of how our eyes kind of process information and how we see things. So I think that would help this quite a bit. A couple things, again, just consistency overall. Cost, uses, all caps, then it's not. So kind of think about what, kind of what's the what's the theme, what's the way you're going to do it, and then stick with it. And again, here, cost is all lowercase now. So what's the, so which one of these possibles are you going to use? And again, you're the designer, so you can come up with whichever one you want to. But the important thing is that you stick with it, because once you start it, you're kind of committed. So you have to, kind of go with whatever the system is. Okay. So let's see. So overall, I think I like how you're segmenting. I like how you're segmenting the information. I like that you've titled, but you really have to work a little bit more on the overall readability. So that dark background, the white type, I think it's not working just because it's a little too much contrast. So how can you make it just a little bit more comfortable for people to read? And then also just overall consistency. How can you, what's your system that you're going for? And then how can you make sure that every part that you're putting into your infographic really follows that system in a good way. So, and then also put some titles in there as well. So, all right, so let's move right along. And okay, so here is another example, and I will, just be quiet again for a couple seconds. You guys can take this in overall. See what you think. I guess I can't zoom out too much. Okay, so this one feels like, to me at least, it's kind of like the happy medium of many different ones kind of put together. I think what's working really nicely is the title. The title is good. And then also the idea that we have this kind of overall flow of information across the whole piece, so it feels very nicely connected, and your eye kind of does move through in an interesting way. So a couple things that are, and we'll see if the chat box has any input. A couple things I think that are a little bit strange, and we actually have this one that we're going to just jump into Illustrator, and I can kind of show you kind of what I'm telling you. So the overall flow, I feel like it would make more sense if we actually started with the pictures, and we had the pictures in kind of a larger place. So we'll do that. The other thing too is that saddle stitching 8 to 80 low cost. These little numbers don't mean anything to me. So 8 to 80 what? I mean, I know it's pages because I'm part of the class community. But if you didn't know it was pages, how would you know it was pages? So is this 8 to 80? Yeah, I have no idea what else that could mean. But it feels like it's like an item number or like an order number or something like that. Let's see, the images are very small. Yeah. Okay, so let's go in here and just take a look. And then one other thing too that came up just as I was looking, as I was trying to be quiet for those couple seconds, is just overall kind of the grid that you're building this on. It's like almost but not quite there, so which is probably because you eyeballed it. And yeah, I feel like whenever anybody eyeballs things, they're like 97% of the way there, and then when you look at it for a while, you're like, wait, I don't know if it's quite there, or I should say when other people look at it, then they kind of realize, wait, I don't know if it's quite there. So you just want to make sure everybody's aligning. So again, it's there isn't like you should always use this grid line. It doesn't really matter what grid line you use, but it matters that everything matches it once you set it in place. So everything just nudge slightly, and it's just these little details will really give you. It'll just feel that much more kind of professional. And another thing too is, not sure what's going on here. I think, oh yeah, it's outline type, so I'm not going to really be able to. Oh no, I am. Okay, so Futura Medium, Myriad Pro Regular, Myriad Pro Regular, Myriad Pro Regular. I think this needs to be changed to, does it go? Oh no, it won't do it. Okay, yeah, because they've been outlined. So I think this needs to be changed to whatever these are, so that again, it just has a sense of consistency. Because right now it feels like this is bold and it feels like this is light. So you want to just kind of put that together. I like this common uses though. I think that's I like how it's kind of pulled away because it separates it out. The thing I was thinking about as far as sizing is, move this guy over, move this here. These are great images. They're just very small. And they're kind of hard to see because they have both the kind of pull out and the open example. So I think it would just make more sense if we did this. It's going to require me to open the layers and, oops, close the chat box, unlock. I promise this will make sense at some point. Okay, so we bring this up here, and bring this guy up there as well. Oops. Okay, then we lost the title, but I think we will get the idea. Oops. So if you just have the pictures bigger, I think it will make more sense just because you'll be able to see them. You'll be able to see them a bit more. So let's get that guy out here. And I mean, I like the frames on them, but I think for just overall readability's sake, it's better if you get rid of the frames, and then if you take away the frames and just have the picture be large, I think that will work better. So this one looks like now the text is a little bit too wide, so you need to kind of scale that back. And common uses, I like. You could even do, if you want to further separate the common uses out, you could do like not that, but this, and arrange, send it to back. So the common uses then are kind of like a white thing that jumps out at you slightly more. So I think there's a lot of, you've got all the materials. So now it's just kind of how can you, and I extended it so we could just extend the text box a little bit. Now how can you just further refine it so that it feels even more complete. Let's move this back down. Okay, so yeah, and then even if you do extend it slightly, which I kind of actually like, then you can move this common uses over a little bit, so it almost becomes like a thing that you can scan another part of your piece. So yeah, so what do you feel about how do you feel now with the sizing, or I'm sorry, with the images? Do you feel like it's a little bit easier to see, a little bit better to see? I feel like it made a difference, but okay, yeah, and then of course adding page number. So I think you could do page number, and then these numbers, and then higher cost. So, and then cost, you could probably say high or low. I would say you could say high, medium, or low, but I don't know that there's any medium, so high or low it is. Might be a good thing as well. So yeah, but yeah, overall, I mean, it's a great start that you had. It's just now kind of coming through and updating so that it just makes a little bit more sense. And like I said, this is design process. You go through, you create something, you step back and you kind of assess how it's working, and you say, okay, is it good? If it is good, what's good about it? If it's not so good, how can I go through and make it better? Okay, so here is another example, and give you guys a couple seconds to look at this and see what you think. Okay, so sadly, there's no title on this one yet again. 100%, because I didn't even think of saying titles. But yeah, so I think overall this has a really nice feel and a really nice flow to it. And I think the reason that that's happening is because it is so incredibly consistent. It is kind of one layout just interpreted 4 different ways. And so because it has that, that ease to it, where you really can predict what's going to come, you really know where the different parts are going to be located. It has a strong sense of repetition in that way. I think it's a little tricky with the gradients and the color white on the type. When I see saddle stitching, there's a small part of me that's just feeling like the contrast isn't quite there. But I'm not bothered by it enough to say change the type to gray, which would be one possibility. But I think just be a little careful that you're not losing the type. So comb binding, spiral binding, it looks great. You have enough contrast. The other two, it's kind of almost there, but it is, it's nothing to change. It's just something to note that you are kind of entering into that danger zone of you may or may not be able to, you may or may not quite be able to read it. So kind of know that that's coming. But yeah, overall, I feel like it's a nice layout. And I think what I really appreciate is those illustrations. I think it's nice to see that you have kind of a consistent vector all the way through. And it looks like it is something that you have created. And so that's, that's a good thing as well, because that shows that you don't just know how to find images, you know how to actually kind of work with and kind of create your own stuff in lots of ways. So yeah. Okay. All right. So yeah, overall, I think it has a nice flow to it. All right. So moving right along, here's our next one, and we'll give a couple seconds on this one as well. Okay, so I feel like with this one, a great, okay, I can't read the title. I would say a great thing about this is that it has a title. Yay. The tricky thing is that, yeah, it's a little difficult to read with the overall striping that seems to be coming through it, and kind of the creation of that texture. And then also with the very thick kind of outline on the texture. So I'm curious. There's a comment that the readability isn't that great on the title. What do you feel like could be done to make it more readable? Is it the outline, or is it the striping that's happening within the letters? Which is kind of as I'm listening to myself just say that, yeah, it sounds like something that if you weren't in the context of this course, you'd be like, wait, what? The outline of the letters or the stripes? What are they doing? Okay, it looks like the stripes. Yeah, so it's not a solid. It's not a solid flow. It's interesting because your eye tends to look at not. You don't see the word as a giant, kind of single complete word. When you have the striping involved in it, you look at the stripes and you're like, your mind can't kind of comprehend both. Interesting. So yeah, I feel like that's a definite consideration. One thing you might try is the stripes feel. I mean, are they uneven? I have no idea now that I'm looking at it. No, the stripes feel slightly uneven to me. And so, a way that you could kind of mitigate any issues with readability is to either make them, super regular, or I think what might even be easier is to just take the stripes, and if you can turn down the opacity in them so they're not at 100%, so they're maybe in like the 40 to 50% range. I think that would give it like the hint of something, but it wouldn't be quite as kind of in your face with the stripes. So I think that might be worth a shot. So I think there's multiple effects on the type. And so anytime you put an effect on type, you kind of tend to degrade the readability, and there's a point of no return. So, you may or may not have reached that on this piece. So just something to be kind of careful with. So what I actually really like about this infographic is how the books are shown, how the different binding methods are kind of shown all the way through. Kind of how yeah, just looking at it, you see it from a different perspective. So in lots of places, we've been seeing it from the front, but now you kind of see it from the top, which is just an interesting different vantage point. Let's see. I don't know if you said this or not, but some letters are connected with a stroke. Yeah. So what do you think about the letters connected with a stroke? Do you feel like do you think that helps, that makes it work? Or do you feel like that's something where we should give them some breathing room? And it's interesting because I think I know how I feel, but I'm curious what the idea is. Okay, so you're feeling like you need some breathing room. Interesting. Yeah. So things that are connected versus things that have some open space. I will say what's kind of fun is when you look at things that are super connected, you get all these interesting little negative spaces created like this. I feel like if you stare at this, it kind of looks like a roller, like going through the print process, which might be actually kind of cool if you could connect this right here as well. Then is the insider space. You have all these little rollers happening. It's like the FedEx logo with the arrow. Yeah, so I mean, definitely something to consider is when you have things with a strong serif and you put a stroke on it, what does that do with your spacing? What does that do with your readability? And how does that change things? What suddenly potentially pops out that may or may not have popped out otherwise? Definitely something interesting to think about. Okay, so one other thing I was thinking, oops, let's clear this as well, is just this type down here to me is kind of hard to read. It feels a little bit too, kind of fancy, kind of fussy for the rest of the layout. So I would just turn this into a sans serif, and I would turn all this into a sans serif actually, starting from saddle stitching down. Just so it feels a little bit more clean, because there's a lot going on in the layout, even though it is pretty muted color palette. But yeah, that's what I'm thinking. What do you guys think about seeing the books from above? And this is directed to the chat box, since we do have a couple students that have shown up. But or also if you're watching via video, what do you think of this new vantage point? Did I bias you saying I really liked it? Because you can say I don't think it's working because it's hard to see. And again, that's, hello design world. Lots of things have that good personal choice. Okay, all is quiet in the chat box front, which is fine. But yeah, so overall, I think kind of some feedback. Just consider the overall readability of your title. It's kind of one of those things that could be slightly contested. And then I would say too, just consider the font choices that you're making within the content area itself. You want to just make sure that they are as kind of clear and cohesive as possible. And in this way, clear and cohesive probably might mean exact opposite of what's going on in the other sections. So they really have that kind of contrasty energy to them. Okay, so let's move right along. Here's I think this is our final one. Yes. Okay, so here's our final example, and this is not quite sure what happened with this one, but this is 4 pages of the different binding methods. So I think it's interesting to see kind of how you've come up with these illustrations, and I like that it's a bit like this one where they seem like they're clearly, well, and even this one, they seem like they're clearly created by hand, but it's a little tricky as far as how they are all related. mostly because you can't really see them all kind of one after another. So it's a bit tricky to really create that comparison feel. So I think you need to really consider how you're showing this, so that we can see them back to back. So I think it looks good, but I kind of wish that they were placed in some way so that you could see them all at the same time, and you can see even the placement and the sizing when I go back and forth between these two. It's like a little animation here, but it's a little different overall. So that kind of makes me say, if these were all together on the same page in the same graphic, there might be some issues overall with just sizing and placement. But again, it's kind of hard to see because they're all on different pages, so you can't really have that good comparison factor. So definitely something to keep track of, and kind of see how it could work better. But yeah, I really like the illustrations. I think that's a nice touch. One thing you might want to be careful of is if it's comb bound, it's not going to have this spine on it. So this looks like a perfect bound spine. So maybe make this a darker color. Same thing for the spiral. Kind of how it's going to come together. So yeah, interesting piece overall. Okay, so I think that's and actually, chat box. Do you guys have any comments or things? Or people who are watching, via video, you can think about it without me talking. Okay, it looks like just wish it was on the same page. Looks good. Yeah. I think that's going to be the key, kind of putting it into one piece. And then when you do that comb binding, oops, I can change perfect bound, spiral binding. So just these little indicators to kind of note what it is, note what's happening. Okay, so I think that completes review. I think that's all the ones we looked at here as well. Yep, yeah, it looks good. And then, and cost. Yeah, for sure. Let me reorganize my slides and get us back in here. Okay, so next thing we are going to do is just take a quick review of the different print methods that we talked about, and then kind of go from there. But before we do that, we're actually going to take just a 2-minute break because if you've been noticing, I've been like sneezing and sniffling, and I really need to just go blow my nose, which may be too much information, but I need to do it so everybody can have a little, 2 minutes, get a drink of water, get up, stretch, that sort of thing, and then we will be back momentarily and go over our printing methods review. Okay, and we are back. All right, so before we jump into print method review, we're actually just going to go over the learning objectives for this week. Make sure we're all kind of checked in, dialed into those. So let's pull up week 2 and go from there. Okay, creating print-ready files, how to do it, how to succeed, that sort of thing, which we actually kind of, we kind of touched on in the assessment last week, which was like the scavenger hunt of printing errors to kind of get through. All right, so learning objectives for this week. Explain the importance of image resolution and sizing in print production. Number 2, discuss industry typical goals, strategies, and methods for spot color die cutting and special coating applications. Number 3, describe characteristics of paper and usage in at least 3 print applications. Number 4, create a print-ready file in Adobe InDesign for an advanced printing method. Number 5, create a print-ready file in Adobe Illustrator for an advanced printing method. And number 6, create a die line that meets industry guidelines to really die cut paper. So lots of learning objectives this week, but the good news is that some of them hopefully are slightly review-ish in nature, so it's not quite as intense as it may seem, though it is legitimately a lot of content for this week. So one thing I want to draw your attention to and say, make sure that you watch it because it's super cool and interesting, is this video down here, print production before there was Photoshop. It is 11 minutes and 28 seconds, so it is a little bit on the longer side of things, but it's so cool and it's so interesting to see how people had to actually work with images before they had the aid of Photoshop, where they had Photoshop on their side, and just how complicated graphic design used to be for those who came before us. So I think, I know I certainly complain about Photoshop on a fairly regular basis because it tends to be glitchy and it crashes and whatever. But if we didn't have Photoshop, oh my gosh, we would have to do so much more work because there's just so much intricacy that really is involved if you do all these things by hand. So kind of an interesting watch for sure. Okay, so print ready files. Let's jump back up here and move right through. Okay, so we're going to just do a quick review of Let Us Print, and this is just to kind of catch everybody up. For those of you who may be just a little bit behind for whatever reason, hopefully this will be a good just reminder of what we've learned, what we've gone through, kind of where we're headed. So handmade aesthetic, which one of these would have that? This is kind of like a little quiz time too, to see how you're shaking it out. So for those of you who are watching via video, you can still participate. Just figure out guess which answer you would say. For those of you who are here, you could do 1, 2, 3 in the chat box, whatever you want. So which one tends to have more of a handmade aesthetic? Is it letterpress printing? Is it offset printing? Or is it digital printing? Okay, looks like chat box is feeling 1, which is letterpress, and chat box would be correct. Yeah. 1, letterpress. So letterpress is the one where there's the most human contact. Often there is a person, doing it by hand, running the press, whereas the other 2 tend to not be so much. Okay, so newest introduction. Who is the new kid on the block as far as these techniques? Is it letterpress, offset, or digital? Okay, yep, number 3, digital. Yep, yeah, letterpress has been around basically forever. plus or minus a couple million years, or a couple million years, a couple hundred years. So letterpress has been around for a while. Offset is also something that's been around for quite a bit, whereas digital is very much kind of the new kid, and things are happening and good with that, and kind of seeing how it's going to progress. Okay, so most popular, what tends to be the most popular, most widely used, that sort of thing. Is it letterpress, offset, or digital? 1, 2, or 3. And most popular is in at the moment. At the moment, it's the most popular, and it, dare I say, it still is the most popular. Okay, it looks like all is quiet. But what I was looking for, as far as answers, is definitely number 2, which is offset. So for large runs, for large production runs, offset is still the most popular print production method. That said, most popular with brides would be letterpress. Most popular with graphic design students who are making the transition from student to professional, probably digital, because it's shorter run. So most popular for large print applications still is going to be offset, but digital is creeping in. Letterpress is always going to be very popular. So wouldn't that be it depends then? Yes, that would be poorly written review question, Lisa. Why don't you be more specific? But in my mind, it all made sense, as we know how that is. Okay, so fastest turnaround time. This one is uncontested, I would say. So who has the fastest turnaround time? Mostly because they don't have to make any plates to print on. That's kind of the key. The more stuff you have to make for printing, the slower the process. If you don't have to make stuff, then you're good. Okay, number 3, digital. Yep, exactly. So digital, you don't have to make any stuff. Your file just converts to pixels, gets sent to the printer, gets reassembled there, and gets outputted. All right, so best for books. And again, I can feel already that this was a poorly written choice, since the thinking in Lisa world may or may not coincide with the thinking in other people's worlds. So best for books, what would you say? Again, kind of think about it. This echoes back to a discussion from week 1, and interesting stuff. Okay, depends. Number 1, yeah, letterpress. Yeah, so it really is all about what you're doing, kind of what you're going for, what the look is, and what you want to do for that. Okay, so I think that's. Oh, okay, we have one more. Most expensive. What would you say? And I think this one is fairly universal as well. Okay, number 2. Yep. Yeah, definitely the most expensive in the investment. And then letterpress is probably the most expensive kind of in per unit purchase. Okay, so letterpress, we're not going to spend much time on this because we kind of already made it through. So centuries old craft of printing, pressing paper against raised type. So cool. Number two, offset. Mechanical process of applying layers of ink to paper with a series of rollers. Each roller has its own specified ink. Pluses, large quantities, larger formats. Minuses, costly. Okay, digital, images sent directly to the printer using digital files. Cost is lower, etc., limited size. Okay, so that was printing methods in about a minute, but it's okay because there's a lot of content that we covered last week in class. So if you're still a little iffy on any of those bits and pieces, I would encourage you to review the session from last week. And also, I would encourage everybody, even if you're not iffy on any of the process, to just go to YouTube and do a search on offset printing or letterpress printing, or digital printing wouldn't be that exciting, but you could do digital printing as well, and just kind of see how these processes work, like see a video of the machines in action, because it's a really cool thing, and it's kind of, it's again another one of those things that I wish we could all, teleport ourselves together to a print production house, to a print studio, and see the presses in action and just have that experience, because it's so cool when you see it and you can actually be there in person. But we can't. But we do have cool things like YouTube, which if you can't go, and if we can't have virtual reality glasses or something, at least we can watch a video and kind of be there in our imaginations. Okay, so let's talk image resolution, kind of what this means, how this shakes out, that sort of thing. And this is in fairly direct application to your discussion for this week. So if you're kind of wondering where this is headed, kind of where it's going. So when I have these two words, or two phrases, I should say, two acronyms, PPI and DPI, does that mean anything to anyone? Do you know what these letters stand for? What these phrases are all about? Do you have any thoughts? Is this kind of nudging you in any way? And if you're here in person, you can type anything in the chat box you might be feeling. If you're watching via video, just ask yourself, do these acronyms mean anything to me? Okay, so somebody in the chat box has typed 72. Can you expound upon that a bit more? 72 what? And what are these? Yeah, what are these mysterious code letters? What are they wanting to tell us? And if you're watching via video, has something, are you like, duh, 72, we know what that is. Okay, let's see, dots per inch. Yep, DPI, so dots per inch, 72, and is 72, well, we'll just, we'll tease this out a little bit more. 72, is that dots per inch, is that good for what? Could we print a book at 72 dots per inch and end up with crisp coffee table clarity? Or, oh, your laptop keeps increasing. Okay, and we won't belabor the point. Okay, so PPI and DPI. So basically, what they stand for, and this is an infographic that I found, which is fabulous. DPI is a measurement of image detail or resolution for a printed piece, indicating the number of ink dots per inch along the vertical and horizontal axis. So DPI, dots per inch, indicates image resolution. PPI is going to indicate a measurement of image detail on an electronic device or an image file, indicating the number of pixels per inch along the vertical and horizontal axis. So they both indicate resolution, but one of them is for print production, And then one of them is for electronic image production. So PPI is for screens, DPI is for printers, and that's kind of the main change in them. So basically, lower on either means a kind of a more compromised resolution. It's blurry, it's fuzzy, it's a little foggy. Whereas higher means a more crisp and clear resolution. So it tends to resolve in a lot better manner. So when in doubt, use the 1-to-1 ratio. Print size in inches equals file size in inches. So at 300 dpi equals 300 ppi as well. And it's important to know the 1-to-1 ratio because we will pretty much always be designing on screen for things that are outputted at a printer. So it's, you have to kind of navigate back and forth across those two methods. So PPI and DPI. All right, so more dots equals higher quality in the image. And here's the kicker. So more dots means higher quality, which is really great. More dots also mean larger image file because it has more dots in it. And so it's always a little bit tricky because as designers, it's very easy to make huge files, but printers tend to not really like huge files. So you have to find kind of the magic between too big, too little, and just right. And often it's a little bit of a balance in that way. But I will say, as a designer, I think always bigger is better. So if it takes a little bit longer to upload or a little bit longer to see, when it comes to print production, I always feel like the larger the image you can use, kind of the better overall. So that's my feeling. If you ask a printer, it's probably the opposite, but at least for design in print production. Okay, so PPI, DPI, more dots, higher quality in the image, also larger file. So all digital images, are made up of tiny squares of color or pixels. The PPI is the pixels per inch. The more pixels per inch, the higher the resolution and the larger file size. This is good because more pixels means better print quality. This is bad because more pixels means bigger sizing for the image. So what works for print? Oh, no problem. Yeah, thanks for coming. Okay, so what works for print? So here's a comparison of how 3 different DPI, which is dots per inch, look when they are zoomed in, kind of magnified to the same size. So if you have 10 DPI, it gets really, really, really blurry. It gets really pixelated, meaning that you see the squares all along the sides of the circle. 72 DPI, again, it gets somewhat pixelated in that you really don't have kind of that clean edge. And then 300 DPI, you've got the super clean edge because there are that many pixels kind of filling in the spaces, filling in the gaps. So 10, 72, or 300, it's not, rocket science to probably choose which one feels the best, feels the sharpest, and therefore which one, if you are designing for print production, you should be always using. Let's see, I can't tell if the first one is a circle. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's like it almost looks like a ghost shape or something that, it's got so many edges to it. That said, there's a little part of me that kind of likes how, it's going to sound very strange, but I like how the pixelation around the corners of images sometimes give it kind of like a decorative feel. So it feels very much like it was created out of Legos or something. And so, it's cool, I think. And there's definitely a place for it in, design, for having these little chunks and pixelations and what that looks like. And there's actually been many designers who have played with with these ideas of pixels and what that means. So it's, I think there kind of is a spot for interesting pixelated images in print design, but the only reason that there is a space is that if you're doing it intentionally, if you meant to do it and you're doing it like 100% commitment, then I think it's great. If it just happened and it's like an oops moment, that's not good. So you have to have a good reason overall. But yeah, I do think it's kind of fun to see those pixels, and that might just be me. But for print production, always go with this guy here, because that will give you a really good, clean, clear edge for what you're putting together. So 300 DPI. 72 you can get away with in web design, and in images that will only be outputted on screen, mostly because screen doesn't have that need for fidelity that print does. So, okay. So let's move right along. So here are two examples. 72 DPI viewed at 300%, 300 DPI viewed at 300%. So you can see the 300 still stays clear, whereas the 72 starts to get a little bit kind of blurry and fuzzy around the edges. So this is the place where I see this come up the most, and the place where personally I am tempted to do this is really when you are working with images pulled off of the internet. So if you have a stock photo that you found, or if you found if you have an open source photo that you found on the internet, or even if you've taken a picture with a social media application like Instagram, social media will compress an image down to 72 or less, just because it makes it smaller. And so then if you take that image and then say, oh, this is so beautiful, I want to take this filtered, retouched, super cool sunset picture or whatever, and use it in print. So I'm just going to grab it and put it in. Oftentimes it will work, but it will only work up to a certain size. And then once you get past that size, it's just going to get pixelated, because it just wasn't created in a way that it has enough information. So it was created in a way that it would be easy to share, and easy to share is great, except when you want to share it via print production methods, and then it tends to break down quite a bit. So yeah, I have, and this year too, I'm gonna make some presents for friends and family using kind of photo book stuff. And I have lots of great pictures on social media, and it's always like, oh, can I use these pictures, because will they actually print in a way that makes them feel logical? Or when I print them, will it be like the image on the left, where it's like, oh, it's almost there, but not quite. Okay, so moral of the story, when you are designing for print production, really be choosing those 300 DPI images. It will make your files larger, and that is okay, because it will have enough kind of clarity, enough fidelity, essentially enough truthfulness, that it will print out in a good way. Okay, so let's move right along and talk a bit about getting colorful. So this is perhaps a little bit of a review from some color pathway and things that we talked about in last week's session. I was saying yesterday's session, but no, not quite yesterday, last week. And that's different color pathways and kind of how they work, how they evidence themselves. Okay, so before we do that, let's kind of get our minds engaged again. It's been about an hour and a half since we've been together, so natural time to think, oh, time to take a little mental break. So quiz time. A process color is what? Created by CMYK mixing, used in printing, created by RGB mixing, or used on screens. And again, if you're just watching via video, how would you answer this? Okay, so if you remember, we had 4-color or process printing that we talked about in um, last week's sessions. So 4-color process, that all kind of indicates, dun, da, 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 oops, I can draw, that all indicates this and this. So CMYK mixing is the kind of the 4-color, and process colors are just the generalized CMYK ones and kind of how they come together. So a process color is created by CMYK mixing and is oftentimes used in printing. Okay, so moving right along. What is this? And again, if you're watching via video, you know, what is this? Do you have any idea? Do I have any idea? Actually, I do, but what is this? Okay, basically what this is a look at a piece, an image that has been printed using 4-color process or CMYK inks, kind of a close-up zoomed in look at it. So basically how process printing works is that process colors are colors created by mixing differing amounts of cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. They are most often used in process printing, and they are inputted into an image because images are made up of tiny dots of pure color that are overlapping each other. So the dots are different sizes, they're at different angles, and together they produce a cohesive image. So you can see what we were looking at was actually the super zoomed in close-up of a picture that had been printed using process colors, which basically means little dots of C, M, Y, and K inputted at different sizes in different angles. And then when we zoom out all the way, our eye does not see all the little different dots. Our eye sees a complete image. So this is an example of an image that has been created using process colors. So CMYK. So process colors, sometimes they're not so good. They are very good because you can get a wide range of colors created from them. So you can create photos, you can create a diversity in kind of scale and shade, you can create some interesting depth and dimension. So process colors overall tend to be very, very good at what they do. But sometimes, as we said in last week's session, sometimes they're not quite so good. So some colors fall outside of the printable CMYK gamut. So we need specialty spot colors if we want to print them or have them work. And basically what this means is that when you are printing with CMYK, because you are using physical materials and you are using a physical process to produce the print, you know, there's limitations to what you can do. So just like, you know, your body has physical limits to what it can do because it's a thing. Same thing with the printing process. You know, there are limits to what it can do. So those limits are especially noticeable in colors, especially when you want to print colors like blues, some reds, some greens. Anytime you want to get a super, super pure color, using CMYK, using process colors, it tends to be a little bit tricky because, you know, it's just not, because the colors are created using a mix, it's just hard to get a special shade and make sure that it stays true from application to application. So we need specialty spot colors if we want to print them or have them work. So a spot color refers to a color printed with its very own ink. And again, that may feel like duh, but it's a good distinction because a process color is actually a color printed with a mixture of ink. So spot color, color printed with its very own ink. So almost but not equal is kind of how you can think about process versus spot colors. So here's an example. So we said that Pantone colors are kind of the poster children of spot colors because they are kind of the worldwide specialty, the established kind of worldwide system, basically of spot colors. So here's an example of spot colors and their CMYK, or their process color equivalent, and you can kind of see how they really do differ in what they're showing. So PMS 1375 as a spot color is on the far left, and then you can see the CMYK equivalent of PMS 130 or 1375 is kind of right next to it. Let me turn up my screen contrast so you can see even more. But yeah, so same thing. This is where it gets really interesting. PMS 2736 is this, nice royal blue. PMS 2736 CMYK equivalent is going to print out as a purple. So that's a major oops if you want the blue and you get the purple instead. Excuse me. And even if you want that bright yellow and you get kind of the like yellow peach instead, that too is kind of a big unfortunate shift that you kind of want to avoid with a client, especially because clients want their color, the colors that they want, and you want to make sure that you're giving them the right stuff. So PMS colors, spot colors, very good when you need a specific kind of color or a specific look to what you're doing. They're also very good because they tend to cut down, when you use them in small amounts, they tend to cut down on the cost of a printed item. So you can't use them for a full image because that would just be way too much. They wouldn't have that capability because they're only one color. But if you design a print job specifically with just like two colors, then instead of having to use four colors, it just becomes a two-color job, and it actually does end up saving some money. So it's an interesting kind of back and forth idea, which in week 3 we're going to talk about pricing a print job, and then it will really kind of come to gel how these things change. Okay, so here's one last interesting picture. You can see we have a logo printed in either a spot color or a logo printed in a process or CMYK mixing color. And it's so cool because when you zoom in, you're just going to have to trust me on this, but we can trust the graphic. When you zoom in and it's a spot color, like all you see is its own ink. It is that color kind of through and through. Whereas when you see a logo printed in a process color and you zoom in, what you see again is going to be just like this range of dots, and not so much going on. There as far as what the color looks like. When you zoom out, it's fine. They're kind of identical, but it's just an interesting thing to know that any piece that has been printed using process colors, at some point, if you zoom in enough, you will see these. You will see these shifts and these changes, and it will be an interesting thing to take in. So, okay, so that was big giant review of print production methods, colors, PPI versus DPI. So good things to keep in mind. Okay, so we're gonna close out our session by jumping into the classroom itself and just checking out what we've got ahead of us for this week. And we're going to start by going into discussion and see what's coming here. Okay, so using images in print production. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Woo. This phrase has been used as an argument in favor of the narrative power of using images and graphics in graphic design. Images and graphics have a raw visual quality that grabs attention and engages emotion even more quickly than words, which the brain must read and then decode for meaning. So basically, we see an image, we feel something that happens way quicker than us seeing a word and having to read it and figure it out and all that business. But yeah, so in addition to telling stories, images provide visual relief in the midst of large blocks of text, giving the reader or audience a welcome rest through the visual pause. And a great indication of this happening in practice are all of our courses in discussions, assignments, assessments, all have these pictures paired with them. And it's for it's for just this purpose. If you just saw all this content without any picture, you might think, oh my gosh, that's a lot of content. You still might think that as you look at this, but at least you have a little picture to kind of go with it. So it just breaks it up a little bit. It just hopefully helps it feel a little bit more friendly. So the professional graphic designer learns to place images strategically in a way that helps the reader process the information being shown, or even provides a visual summary of the content. By learning to place themselves in the shoes of the reader or audience, or by being empathetic, professional graphic designers strive to produce a reading experience that is engaging and delightful for all. However, just as we learned in week 1 that the physical feel of a printed piece impacts the experience of the printed piece, so as a designer, you must be cognizant of physical properties and materials. So the images and graphics too have special considerations that could impact the reader's experience. Thus, as a designer, you need to understand how to best work with images and graphics. Longest sentence ever. But basically what that means is how you print things makes a difference, because you kind of feel, you have that like tactile kind of feeling aspect to it. Same thing, how you work with images has an impact, because when people visually look at them, visually engage with the information, they're going to have an emotional response as well. When working with images and graphics that are ultimately produced in a printed publication, it is vital that you as the designer use only high-resolution images that are large in size, so that when printed, the images appear as crisp and clear as possible. As opposed to designing for screen-based outputs, i.e. designing a web page or website, where lower resolution is permissible and even beneficial, high-resolution images are those with at least a 300 dpi. When a client has print content where images or graphics might be appropriate, it is important for the designer to help educate the client on what image formats are best for optimal output. So it's very important that you tell your clients, I need high-resolution imagery if you want this to look good. So good things to keep in mind. Okay, so for this discussion, imagine that you are once again working with a publishing company introduced in week 1. So this was the publishing company that wants to produce the volume of short stories of lesser-known audience or lesser-known authors, and they wanted your help in what way would be best to print the books. So here they're coming back. And they feel that some imagery, graphics, illustrations, etc. Would really help the books appeal to a wider audience. So one of the team members is an amateur photographer, has many photos he's taken with a popular social media app that compresses and filters images. So you can think Facebook, you can think Instagram, you can think anything where Snapchat, where you have a photo and then you can do a bunch of stuff in it. He feels that these images would be perfect for the book because they have a heavily filtered, mysterious look. The other team members feel it would be better to hire a professional photographer and stage a photo shoot, or even hire an illustrator and have them custom illustrate each story. As the designer, they are looking to you for guidance as to what you think might be the best choice for them. So how would you explain image resolution to the publishing team? So think, how would you explain PPI and DPI and what that means, and what that what that means for their outputs, how that would, be an important thing, that sort of thing. What are the benefits of producing images in-house as opposed to hiring a professional? So around these ideas, really think about benefits as in cost, benefits as in kind of managing others' talents, benefits as in, having the same culture, all those sorts of things, could be interesting to think about, to search on. Conversely, what are the benefits of hiring a professional and not producing images in-house? Again, think about approvals and just time spans. People that work in-house tend to have like 10 major things they're doing at any point, whereas people that are outside, that are contract work, tend to just have one thing that they do. So speed sometimes is a key factor. Do you feel that one direction is better than the other? How would you present your choice and persuade your team? If the team decides to use illustrations, what resolution must you warn them about, or other production considerations for a document created in Illustrator? In addition, how might hand-drawn illustrations change the feel of the book as opposed to photography? So for this discussion, you actually really have a lot. You really have a lot to think about, but it is a very real world scenario, because when you are contracted to do something, like when you are hired to do something, chances are your client is going to look at you as kind of like the one-stop shop of whatever they need to know. And so they're going to say, so if I want to go this direction, if I want illustrations, what should I think about? How expensive is it going to be? Can you do it? All of these ideas, and what's it going to feel like? So you have to really think to yourself, like, a book with hand-drawn illustrations, how does that feel different than a book with photographs? We kind of encountered that in the information graphics this week. Some people used photos of stuff. Some people used illustrations. Some people used both in the same piece. So, how would you kind of engage and explain that? And then, what's best? What would you recommend? If this was your book, what would you go with? How would you kind of steer them? That sort of thing. So for your citation, you might use articles that show examples of image and integration into printed publications, comparing photography and illustration in message communication. You could also look at kind of what does it mean to be an in-house designer? How does being an in-house designer differ from being a freelance or a contract? Kind of what are those implications? How's the experience different? So that might give you guys some good ideas for time management. But yeah, it's an interesting issue to engage with and kind of wrestle through. One thing I did want to say, just make sure everybody's responding to at least 2 other people. And these don't have to be, huge responses of great depth, just like 50-ish words. Will really help us have kind of a dynamic class discussion. You guys are doing great overall, but there are just a couple of people where I was like, oh man, you had such a great post. Like, if only you'd responded also, you could have kept the conversation going and gotten about 15 more points, which, does help the grade as well. So yeah, here's the first post I did. Dots per inch fuzziness, what that looks like. So be sure to kind of jump in as you can. All right. Well, that's going to kind of bring us to the end of things. In tomorrow's session, we have lots to cover. So we're going to talk about making this paper stock swatch booklet and what that entails. And this is going to introduce us to the idea of die cutting and how you set up a die cut as well as a spot color, as well as a specialty coding application. If you're like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of stuff to learn, it's kind of like you just do it one way for a lot of these things. So it sounds really impressive and it looks really impressive when it's done. But from a design standpoint, kind of here's top secret info, it's actually really easy. So don't worry about this. You know, it's all about kind of how you create the document. So we're going to do that. And then we're also going to touch on the assessment for this week, and kind of a heads up. Oops. The assessment is what's going to carry you through. So the assessment's going to turn into a cumulative project. So just kind of something good to keep in mind. So maybe, you know, look ahead and see kind of what's coming in weeks 3 and 4. But yeah, we're going to check into this as well. And this is creating a print ready file in Illustrator. So we can kind of go through exports and print readies for each of those pieces. All right, well, that will all be for another day. So thanks, guys, for a great first session of the second week. As usual, if you have any questions or any concerns, or if anything's going on, please let me know. And also, as usual, late work, always a good thing if you need to turn in any. And if you don't, pat yourself on the back. That's even better. And then also, for those of you whose work we showed and we did feedback on, if you want to do a resubmission after you've done some updates, I would be very open to that. And I would probably change your grade accordingly. But even more, really consider, you know, this is you're coming to the end of your time here in many ways. Excuse me. So how can you be creating in ways that really feel like they are portfolio quality, and you can just put them into your portfolio and they look like someone would hire you and pay you lots of money for, because that's a good thing in many ways. So kind of go back through, tweak those, change those, update those as you might need to. And it might even be as simple as, you know, just adding a title. Since apparently that's something easy to forget, as I know, but does make a lot of difference once you kind of put it into practice. All right, well, I guess that's it. All right, well, take care, guys. Have a great rest of the day, or whatever day it happens to be that you are watching this on. And I will look forward to catching up with you all in our next session, which will be back at our regular time, which is Wednesday at 1 p.m. Mountain Time, where, like I said, we're going to go over the assignment and the assessment in pretty big detail, and kind of get that done. All right, well, take care, everyone. See you later.